Hey there, it's Gabrielle Nicolay from SpeechKids and Raising Orchid Kids. And today I am joined by Lisa Kays. Lisa, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
This has been a long time in the works.
Best laid plans.
Best laid plans. But we are here to talk about your children from the parent perspective. You are the parent of two kiddos who have been in intervention of various kinds, not just speech.
Right.
So will you just back us up and sort of walk us through when you noticed that something was going on and then what happened next?
Yeah. That was actually part of why I remember I wanted to talk to you back when I said I would do this 1,000 years ago, was because when my oldest son was, I think, just, humming along and doing fine until he turned 2. And then something happened. He actually, now I'm like kind of curious, he got a bit of a cold. I don't know, he's kind of sick. All of a sudden his sleep changed. We had like a sleep routine. All of a sudden he went from falling asleep at 8 to it would be 11 and midnight, no matter what we did. It was like a spinning top. He stopped eating anything except chocolate milk for like 6 months. It was a little bit terrifying. Suddenly started getting car sick. He'd like been in the car a lot. He'd been fine. Suddenly we couldn't drive for 5 minutes without him throwing up. I think those were the main things, but he was also, I didn't know, I was like, I had no clue what this was. I'm like, is this just when they say the terrible twos, is this what they mean? Because this is terrible. And what happened, what I wanted to talk about was that he was actually in some ways diagnosed by a friend of mine. We went to a play date, and the other thing that would happen is he would run like at parties with other kids. At his birth, he fled his birthday party, wanted to walk around the block. We were at like another kid's birthday party, and he was like walking the periphery, he just didn't seem to be doing what the other kids were doing. And my friend, thank God, said, she was so scared to say this to me. And this is part of what I wanted to talk about. She was like, I don't want to overstep. I don't want to make you mad, but have you considered like sensory, which I'm a clinical social worker. I had never heard of sensory issues. I didn't know, but I've always been very like, no, tell me more. What? So I went and read the book. I think it's called,
The Out of Sync Child, probably.
And I was like, oh, yes. And she said, my kids do PT at this place. They have an OT. You might call. So I called and did the assessment, and he was off the charts in all 4 quadrants that you could be off the charts. He was just out there.
He was dysregulated, as we say.
Real dysregulated. And so he started OT at probably 2 and 3 months, however long this took. And the vomiting stopped within a month. She had regulated the car sickness within a month. The sleep persisted for a long time. But I mean, we also just discovered all these things that were going to impact him in school. Like he wasn't going to be, he had noise issues. So he was having trouble in groups because of the noise. So she really, doing that year of OT, I think, is what enabled him to be okay in school. And he was really fine. We had to get him into a smaller classroom setting and a private school. But I am constantly just grateful that friend said, hey, I want to tell you something, because it can be scary, I think, to like say that. And I wish it weren't. Like parents know things once you've been through something, and so I'm so grateful to her. And I wish we had more of a culture of not being like scared to talk to each other about what our kids have going on. I wish we talked about this stuff like we do swimming lessons. Like, my kid didn't know how to swim when he was born, so I put him in lessons, and we share the instructors and we talk about it. And I wish it was like that with some of these other skills.
Well, and this is what I appreciated so much when you came to me with number 2 was you were like, just tell me all the things and we'll absolutely do that. And for the children, that is in fact what they need. It's like, clean up your own whatever, so that you can assist them and meet them where they are, which is what you were so naturally able to do. And your kids have reaped the benefit of that, right? Like, And so, yeah, I mean, I agree with you. And I think it's often very hard for people because of their own stuff and whatever gets triggered. But yeah, no, this is why I'm so happy that you're here and why I wanted to have this conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think, I mean, I've learned from all of you guys how important that the brain is so plastic. So if you can do it, I think so many parents get told like, wait and see, or like, it'll even out, or they don't. And I think things get stigmatized. I think there's reasons for fear. I'm like, I don't want my kids stigmatized. I don't want them given medication at like the age of 4. All these things that none of you ever tried to do, and I think that my kid's gonna know he's weird. And like, David still is like, when do I get to go back to that fun gym? Like, why don't we go to the gym anymore? Like, he loved it. He thought he was getting the greatest playtime ever. Like, he loved it, still loves it. I mean, so it's like, I think we have so many fears based on our adult perception of like, and the kid doesn't know. I mean, they think they're going to the best playtime ever with like their own adult who does. He loved it.
Who exists solely for them and lives in that place where they're just delighted, to be welcomed every time they go. Yeah.
And you can work on it when their brains are like Jello.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so older son did OT for sensory processing, which sort of helped with the dizziness, helped with the regulation. And then you noticed something else.
And then in the pandemic, because he was home during virtual school, the actual nightmare of four-year-old boys, and then what happened? No, he started virtual kindergarten, and he suddenly started. He like could not look at the screen. He was like spinning around in his chair, like super, and he'd never had issues at his like he'd always been like, they're like, raise your hand, and like, that kid. And I was like, what? And he was very intellectual. He was very verbal, very intellectually curious. I was like, this is weird, this child. I mean, I know it's on a screen. He would also start, if I was reading to him, and he was getting older, so I'd start saying like, which word starts with the letter B on the page, big, huge Elephant Piggy books. And he would run, like physically run out of the room. And I was like, that seems odd. And so this was the other, is that, I talked to his teacher at the kindergarten, who I'm sure was overwhelmed and like exhausted. And she was like, he's just not engaged. And I was like, but why is he not engaged?
Pause. That is the $1 million question. It's like, he's just not. No. There's a reason under there. Please, let's find it.
Yeah, because kids, I mean, I believe in like, there's no bad kid.
Yeah.
And kids want to do what they're supposed to do, and they want to learn. I mean, I helped a family in my practice diagnose their kid with dyslexia, because I was like, this isn't lazy. I don't believe in that. I don't know what this is, not my domain, but like, get an assessment. The kid was dyslexic. Like,
yes. No wonder you don't want to do something if it feels terrible. Of course you don't want to do it.
Yeah, I was like, this is weird. But so, I couldn't, but thank God, his OT, well, and then I was like, this virtual thing is not working. We sent him back to his preschool for another year because they had a spot. And I thought, and even in person, it was like, he'd been this like star student. He's spinning in the classroom. He can't focus. He can't pay attention. He's spacey. I was like, what is going on? So I was like, is it the pandemic? Is it, but and it turned out he did have some anxiety that had developed, as we all did in the pandemic. So we got that treated. Okay. And I said to his OT, I said, I think there's something wrong with his eyes. Like, I think there's something, but his vision was always 20/20 perfect, nobody. And she said, well, let me watch. So she started like doing more vision-y things. And she said, I think you're right. And the school was saying, it's not vision. That's not what this is. It's something else. But she gave him like some preliminary assessment. And she said, yeah, he's off. Like, he's not tracking. He's not.
Now we're about to step off the main line here.
Yeah.
Developmental ophthalmology is considered controversial in the field. I happen to think that things wouldn't exist if they didn't work for someone. So the fact that developmental ophthalmology is present in the world means it works for somebody. So I'm gonna let you continue, obviously, and we're gonna talk about it, but I just want people to know, like, if they're looking for hard science, yeah, we're gonna have trouble with that. But be that as it may, keep going.
Well, and so she did this, she evaluated him and she was like, he's not doing this, he's not doing that. I think we should see the developmental which I didn't even know that was a thing. Like, who knows? So he got assessed and he ended up with, I think, 5 different diagnoses. So he had, like, in concrete terms, he didn't do convergence. So like he would see 2 way before you and I should see 2. Like when something is, she's like, that makes it hard to read if you're reading and there's 2 of things, that's
and you
fine.
don't know at that age that it's not supposed to be like that. This is the thing that we forget.
Right.
When kids are, anytime we're dealing with a developmental issue, our little person thinks that that's just how life is. Think about that for a second. Like, that's crazy.
Right. Like he couldn't communicate. Like, and he didn't know what he was seeing wasn't what I was seeing.
Right.
So he's thinking, like, why can you point at this thing and I can't point at the thing? Like, what's wrong with me?
Right.
And so he had the convergence, and then he also, like, couldn't, let's see, how is it? He has trouble moving his eyes without moving his head.
Disassociation.
Also makes it hard to read, and it takes a lot of work. And so he's had to do a lot of work, and I don't even know what I can't remember now what the other ones were. But so he started a course of vision therapy, which, again, you're partially like, is this hocus pocus? I always, though, with all these things, and I mean, I will say I'm a highly privileged white woman, but the worst that's going to happen is we're going to light money on fire.
Yep.
Nobody's going to get hurt. He's not going to get hurt doing vision therapy.
Particularly not if he likes it.
Yeah. Which at first he didn't.
Okay.
Like, we had to switch that up, but to get it more developmentally appropriate, but it worked. He doesn't run from reading it. He's reading. I wouldn't say he likes reading, but he's reading, he's writing, his attention span is different. He doesn't flee when he's looking he became, like, happier. He just, like, settled down a little bit, like, and he's still working on it. I mean, it's going to be probably another year or 2. And his OT works on it with him, but she's like, no, this is, I mean, they test him. His convergence is different. It's like, you can't, that's just what it is.
I mean, that's where these slightly, I don't even know what to call them really, but like developmental ophthalmology in particular, it has a very clinical bent. They haven't done randomized controlled studies, but they're doing, it's called something, single case design studies, essentially, right? Where you're like, okay, before treatment, you've got this, after treatment, you've got this. And by the way, we see the changes in your behavior. So that tells us that any kind of behavioral change tells us that neurological change has occurred.
Yeah.
for good or ill, right?
And I will say one thing that was crazy, his sleep got more regulated. Like, there were so many, the other thing it affects is bike riding.
Yes.
The whole thing was just, as she was like, well, I was like, is this why he doesn't like to ride a bike? And she's like, oh yeah, don't even try. She was like, do not put him on a bike. He's going to be miserable.
So what's interesting about that is bike riding has 2 components, balance and vision, right? Because you have to both feel your balance on the bike, but also see where you're going and plan where you're going. So you had addressed the vestibular portion of the program, which is the balance, but you had not yet addressed the visual. And so that meant he could, as long as his feet were on the ground, he could navigate, but then you had to build in the visual piece.
And it's the turning. He's fine if he's going straight. It was something about coordinating the turn with it's just the way these systems interlock is so interesting.
Well, and I say this all the time. It is a wonder we're not bumbling around, bumping into each other and kind of just grunting all the time. Seriously.
Yeah.
How is this even a thing?
Right. And it is interesting too, because when I look back, I'm like, I had some of this. We didn't know what to do about it. Nobody, it was just kind of like, I was a picky eater. I was a little uncoordinated. You know what I mean? Like, I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
this tracks. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, the difference that I'm always talking about, the clinical line, like which side of the clinical line are you on?
Right.
We can tolerate late talking without any kind of worry, but we're going to take some measurements and we're going to sort of see where we are, because if you're, after 3 months and we've been monitoring, let's jump in. Let's give you some help with that.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then my younger son, because we noticed this with David, we looked into it with Lucas, because he had an actual visual. You could see his eye, the strabismus going out.
Okay.
And I worked with you because he was very delayed in his speech and in his pretend play.
Yep.
And his ideation and motor planning, all of that. And so he goes through to a therapeutic school right now, and he works with a visual person like 3 times a week. And the speech came online, the motor came on, like, it's like, oh, I mean, it's like he's like a different kid every 2 weeks. It's bizarre.
That's amazing.
But they really think, what they said was, if your system can't see right, your brain is so busy figuring that out that it can't learn how to like talk and do it's very important that you can see.
Yeah. And so much of this in development is about like, right, how hard is one area working to the detriment of others? And some of it is really, and this is the complication in early development too, is we're not popping kids into fMRI scanners and there is no standard brain pattern. I mean, there's some trends, but right. So we have to look at observable behavior. And a lot of those observable behaviors look very similar sometimes, right? So we've got a kid who doesn't sleep or doesn't eat a variety of foods or doesn't talk. But then to your earlier points, like, well, why? What's the reason? And what are the inroads? And I actually suspect that there are many different doors that unlock things, right? But in this particular case, certainly, and probably in others, I mean, definitely in others, this visual component, if we're not working so hard over here, then we just open everything up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why it's been so helpful. And that was just to have professionals who can help you ask about which door, because it wouldn't even have occurred to me. I was like, well, his eyes are fine. He doesn't seem dyslexic. Like, I don't, and you can't test that. I didn't even know this was a thing.
Right.
So it's so helpful. I'm always just saying to people, like, just talk to somebody. I don't even care, because kid people, they will get you to the right kid people. I don't understand the kid things, but they know how to get you into the right door.
This is such a good, I love that. Right. Kid people can get you to the right kid people. And that is like, just from our practice standpoint at SpeechKids, certainly, and raising Orchid kids as well. But that ability to kind of look at what's going on. And when people come to SpeechKids, they get asked about sleep, diet, poop, behavior, attention, play, motor. Like, we ask about all that stuff because it matters. It matters because if I'm going to haul you in for weekly speech therapy or multiple times a week speech therapy, I have to know that is the primary issue and that's the door I want to be working on. Right. Because there came a time you and I were working together. Well, me and your son and I were working together. And I said, you know what? I don't know that this is his primary thing. Like, let's go get some additional help here and see what happens to the speech and language.
Right.
And we actually have stopped working together because
Mm-hmm.
he's now, and he's getting speech at his school as well, which is more integrated. But that happens all the time.
Yeah. And I sometimes think parents worry, like, if I go see a professional, they're just going to want to sell me what they do. And they're going to, want to like keep me in it forever. And I'm sure they're like not great professionals who may do that. But like, first of all, y'all are busy right now. But I always just want to say, like, good ones are not, they want to get your kid to the right door, and they want to be using their time to work with the kids they need to, like, they're going to help you. Yeah. And I wish it just wasn't so scary, because I think if you're like me, and I'm again a clinical social worker, I know things. Yeah. I still feel very out of my depth with kid stuff, and it's scary then, because it's like buying a car and you're like, am I going to get screwed
Ripped
over?
off,
Is somebody going to take advantage of me? Are you going to pathologize my kid? Like, it's scary when you don't know.
Yeah. And I think some of that is, and we had a parent on earlier in the series who was like, you just have to find the right people for you. And that's not right. I'm not the right therapist for everybody. And that's fine. Like, there's a lot of us, and you get to choose. As a consumer, you have to pick the person that resonates for you. And then the downside is you might have to interview a bunch of people. And so can you speak a little bit actually about that? Like, how did you find SpeechKids, and how did you decide, oh yeah, that's what I'm going to start with? Do you remember?
I mean, it was my son's preschool referred us to you when they noticed in his interview, he was a second, he was a sibling, so he was going to get in, and they were trying to figure out how to get him ready.
That's right.
And I tend to just trust them. They tell me to go to somebody, I go.
Yeah.
I've always been like that with anyone. So that was how we found you. And I thought I always quote to people, like parents that I'm trying to like get to go see somebody, how you were like, why worry? We don't need to worry. We're just gonna, because I was just like, do we need to, what is this? And you were like, why worry? We're just gonna like help him with these skills. Like, we don't need to worry. And I liked that. And so I've always just gone, and I've been very lucky. I've never run into a bad practice. I've always gotten referred to good people, probably because of how privileged and lucky we are. But it felt like a good fit. Trusted. But it is, you have to trust your instincts, and you have to trust people saying, don't worry about it. Or you have to you have to trust you when the school is saying, don't worry about it, or the preschool, or your parents, you have to, if you're worried, I always say, go pay somebody to help you not be worried. And half the time, like with Strong Start in DC, it's free.
Yeah.
You can, for free, someone will tell you whether or not you need to worry. That's my thing, is I'm like, I'm going to get a professional to tell me if I need to worry.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Ask the questions, ask them early, ask them often.
As soon as possible.
Yeah. I think that's to me is the key takeaway for your kids in particular. And why I'm so happy you came is like, you were not daunted by the task of like, something's going on, we need answers.
Yeah.
And so I hope that, for parents watching this, that they will be emboldened to take action and ask those hard questions. And again, I'm glad I said that to you. We don't need to worry. We just need to ask the questions and see what answers we get. And then we set about trying some keys.
Right.
And see what we get.
And none of it's going to be scary for anybody.
Yeah.
And your kid's going to probably think he's having a great time playing somewhere.
So good.
Somebody fun.
I love it. Lisa, thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome. It was great to talk with you.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.